Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the second decan of Virgo. I hope that you're having a wonderful day wherever you're joining us from. Please let me know if you are here with us today. If you're joining us in the chat, just put it in the chat box and let me know that you're here and where you're stopping in from. We are going to take a deep dive into the symbolism associated with Virgo, especially the second 10-degree section. We're going to kind of break down all of the different aspects that are going to be perfecting around the new moon. We're going to talk about an opposition with Saturn. We're going to talk about Venus conjoining the South Node. And then we're going to kind of take the new moon and we're going to look at a week or two after the new moon and how it's going to unfold into the full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces. So we're going to kind of get you through that full moon in Pisces, that lunar eclipse, and hopefully prepare you for the twists and turns of fate. So I hope that you're doing well out there today. Trip Wilder the First is here. Hey, what's up, Josh? Josh from Maine is stopping in. Nice to see you, my friend. It's been a while since I've seen you. Hope you're doing well up there in the Northeast. Rachel Fletcher is here. Says hello from Roanoke, Virginia. Oh, I love this. She's got the Virgo emoji set going on. The wheat, the bees, the orange, and the yellow. I love it. Hope you're doing well, Rachel, and having a nice afternoon over there in Virginia. Susanna is here. Says Susanna is here from Finland. Nice to see you, Susanna. Hope you're doing well. It has been a while, my friend. I hope that you are doing well and that lake life is treating you well. I always see these beautiful photographs of Susanna walking her beautiful cats along the lakeside and in Finland with all the beautiful conifers and flowers. It's a pretty idyllic, fairy-like experience. So thanks for joining us here today, Susanna. Raven's here. What's up, Raven? Says hello from Kansas. Nice to see you, Raven. How you doing, my friend? Always nice to see you in the chat and hope things are going well your way as well. All right, my friends, let's get down to business. Before we do, I have a few announcements, if you will. Forgive me for a few business announcements here. We are going to be offering astrological readings, we being me, at my website, spencermichaud.com. Yes, I do these live streams every Friday, and this is a nice way to connect with the community, but I also do readings. So if you are interested in getting your own personal natal chart read, and having a conversation and a brainstorming session, my sessions are very solution orientated. So if you're trying to figure out something that's been tripping you up, especially during Virgo season, and maybe trying to find a new process, it's a great time to reach out and click on the Book Now button at spencermichaud.com and sign up for a reading. I would love to work with you. So check that out. I also have a Virgo season sale going on. The Decans of Virgo, my webinar that I show slides from. I show slides every week from my Decans webinars. Those are 10-degree sections of the zodiac, so we get even more specific about the aspects that are perfecting during the week. And I did 2.5 to 3 hour webinars on each of the signs that include all 36 of the decans. So check out the Decans of Virgo right now. It's on sale for 20% off. You can find that on the store button at spencermichaud.com. And of course, I have a beautiful magical partner named Tanya Andrews, and she has some very cool new stuff in the store at her Etsy storefront right now. She's been working very hard, doing a lot of elected magical material behind the scenes, and some of those things are about to get rolled out in the next few weeks, and it is exciting. And this one in particular, the new Exalted Moon in Taurus materia, is amazing stuff. I wear it every day. I have a natal moon in Taurus, and this just makes me feel centered in my body, and it brings abundance and good fortune. I'm super excited about it. Go over to Etsy, check it out, support her, and bring a little bit of the Taurus moon goodness into your life. If you want to support the work that I'm doing here today on the channel, the easiest way to do so, first of all, is to just like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to my newsletter. that you can see in the description of this video or podcast. But you can also buy a super chat. Super chat is the little $ in the chat today if you want to support the work that I'm doing. You can also go to buymeacoffee.com and donate to the channel that way. These are the main fundraisers I do here, super chats and buy me a coffee. So that's how I get paid to do this work here today. So I always appreciate the generosity of this community. So thank you for those of you who have donated and those who are considering. Okay. That's what I've got for you with our little announcements. I'm going to check back in with the chat here. Susanna says, it's not a lake, it's a sea. Oh my goodness, you live right by the sea. That's incredible, Susanna. Even cooler. So you've got like, man, saltwater stuff out there. That's pretty neat. That's very exciting that you live over by the sea. Yeah, keep those idyllic scenery pictures coming, Susanna. It's very cool. Not surprising that you're an artist and that your work is inspired by nature because you live in a beautiful area of the world. Stephen the Jupiterian is here. What's up, Stephen? Says, yo, 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 late but here. Happy Friday. Nice to see you, Stephen. I'm glad that you and your mullet are back in the chat here today. It's always nice to see you in your profile picture, my friend. Susanna says, I could recommend getting a reading from Spencer. Thank you, Susanna. Yeah, we've had a beautiful, beautiful connection, Susanna, and it's always exciting to see people that I've connected with through personal readings return to the chat each week. It's super cool. We have an ongoing relationship. If we have a reading together, we become sort of like family. So this is what we try to do here on the channel. So thank you, Susanna. Rachel says, so excited. I've been delightedly waiting for her Exalted Moon series. Yeah, check it out, Rachel. It's really cool stuff. Like I said, I wear it every day. Taurus Moon is I think one of the just the most relaxed, gentle types of experiences in the zodiac. It's a really good stuff, especially when we need some stability in our life, especially for our emotions. We're feeling tossed and turned by the emotions of the week, of the month. It's a really great stabilizing force, and I think all of us can use a little bit of stability in our life, especially with Mars heading into Cancer. I think that Taurus Moon can help stabilize that Cancerian Mars that's going to be coming. We'll talk about that today. But those are some of the choppy waters that I think a Taurus Moon series can be really helpful with. And Thomas Hines is here, says, Namaste, Spencer, and everyone from San Francisco. Nice to see you, Tom. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Yes, blessed hands we've got there. Okay, friends, let's take a look at this new moon, and let's break it down. Let's talk about it, break it down. We've got the new moon in the second decan of Virgo that we're going to be working through. That's happening on Monday evening, depending on your time zone. Let's bring it up on the chart here and take a look. What do you say? And let's make it bigger. Okay, so we have this new moon in Virgo, okay? And I'm going to open up my presenting tool so I can draw on the screen. There it is. And so here we've got the new moon at 11 degrees of Virgo, okay? Let's make it, this is the Virgo part of me that says, let's make that circle a little tighter. Okay, so we've got an 11 degree sun and moon, the middle decan of Virgo. It is going to be hosted by Mercury in Leo. We also have an opposition with Saturn and Pluto by whole sign. I'm sorry, Neptune by whole sign. Excuse me, misspoke. But the opposition with Saturn is something we'll talk about today. There is also Venus making a conjunction with the South Node in its home domicile of Libra. So we'll talk about that. And I think one other thing that we're kind of looking at here with this new moon is we've got Mars here making a square with Neptune. So those are the kind of the players in the game, the play or the drama of this new moon, as you might say. So a couple things there. That's getting kind of messy here, but I just wanted to point those things out. First of all, Virgo, we've got this new moon opposite Saturn retrograde. So let's think in big picture terms before we get into the nitty gritty of Virgo. I do think that this particular area of the zodiac is concerned with encapsulating essence or a dream into physical form, or even hiding away the flame of spirit in some sort of cloak. Okay, this is talked about in 36 Faces by Austin Coppock. And a lot of this is related to Demeter and how Demeter would cloak herself and be able to come and walk amongst mortals in disguise. There's also a ruler, a planetary ruler, a face ruler for the second decan of Virgo that is a combination of Venus in the descending triplicity method, or in the descending Chaldean order method, excuse me, and then Saturn in the triplicity method. So you can kind of blend those two things together and see this particular area of Hermes' house of Virgo as a Venus-Saturn type of experience. And Austin talks at great length about the concept of Hephaestus, the great smith that was able to do hard, dirty work to create great works of beauty and utility. Like the most beautiful, amazing, divine objects were crafted by Hephaestus. And of course, Hephaestus was married to the most beautiful of the Olympian goddesses, Aphrodite. So there is this concept of the hard, dirty, kind of maybe even disgusting work that you have to do sometimes to make something beautiful. And that there's a process involved with that. And oftentimes we get frustrated by the challenges of incarnation, the challenges that we have to overcome with dealing with matter, dealing with material. You, as an artist, you may be able to see a beautiful sculpture in a piece of wood or a piece of marble. But when you start implementing the tools to chip away at it, sometimes it can be frustrating. You can get a splinter. It might not be shaping up the exact way that you want. Maybe you make a certain chip in one area, but it splits off a piece that you were hoping to use as a part of the sculpture itself. If you're painting something, you may have a vision of what you want to paint, but let's say you're using watercolors or something, and the paint has a mind of its own. The water can drip in a certain direction. You might feel like you've put a little too much paint on the brush. There are factors involved that are somewhat out of our control when we're doing a creative process. And Virgo is trying to bring order to some of that chaos. The challenge with this, though, especially with this particular new moon, is that it is opposite Saturn in the second decan of Pisces. And that energy is very different. And it is one of sometimes overestimating our ability. Oftentimes there is a satisfaction that we can see present, especially when Jupiter is in the second decan of Pisces, where there's just this faith that everything's going to work out, that this is good enough, and I don't necessarily need to learn more or skill more. There is a beauty of self-acceptance in the second decan of Pisces. But Saturn sometimes brings us some frustration or some maturity. It can bring us some blockages. I would say that the downside of Saturn and Pisces too is overestimating our abilities. And I think that I think Virgo in particular, this is coming from someone who has 3 planets in Virgo: Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Sometimes it is there is a difficult feeling when you feel like you don't have the right skills to do something. You can be really hard on yourself. And I think that this feeling could be, sometimes the opposite feeling is if you feel a little bit too overconfident, that you're like, I'll just figure it out. I don't have to go through the process. I don't have to do the dirty work. Spirit's got my back. And sometimes that can be true, but there is a balance between taking action and getting involved in the process and then letting the the universe what it does, letting the watercolor do what it does, co-creating with the divine. Any artist will tell you that there are these beautiful, happy accidents that happen when you are doing art. And sometimes you can't plan for those things. And I think this new moon is going to teach us that. We might be very concerned and very interested in controlling the process and with closing the gap. There is a really incredible quote by Ira Glass that I always love to talk about with my songwriting class that I was teaching in the past. And I wonder if I could find it. Ira Glass is, of course, the author, or he's an author, and he is also the host of This American Life. And he had this beautiful quote that I used to use in this class. And I'll read it for you because I do have it here. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to share that part of my screen here. Let's see if let me just read it for you. And, no, I'm going to bring it up. I want you to see it. Sometimes we have some visual learners here too. And it is important, I think, sometimes to be able to do that. Hold on a second. Whoops. Uh-oh. Let's see. Well, never mind. Let me just read it for you. I've got too many things going on here at once, so I apologize for that. But Ira Glass says, "Nobody tells this to people who are beginners, and I wish someone told me. All of us do creative work. We get into it because we have good taste." Okay, remember, this is a Venus-ruled face of Virgo. But there is this gap. For the first couple years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we want it to have. We all go through this. And if you are just starting out or you are still in this phase, you've got to know that it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week you will finish one story. He's talking about writing. It is only through going through a volume of work that you will close that gap, and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And he says, I took longer to figure this out than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You've just got to fight your way through. So that's a quote from Ira Glass about the gap, and the gap being the gap between our taste and our ability. Now, I've got a little bit of a different thought than Ira Glass about some of this. I will say that the gap is never quite closed, especially if you have Virgo placements in your chart. You can get closer to the vision, but I think that the gap is movable. You're always chasing a vision, and sometimes that vision changes based on your new skill set. But I do think that you can get closer. You can get closer and closer and closer while still growing. Now, this to me is really an important quote for this new moon, because we have a desire to bring something into form, to maybe create a beautiful work of art, whatever medium that you choose. I was having an interesting conversation with my dad the other day, who is a big science fiction fan, and he's reading Arthur C. Clarke right now, the OG science fiction writer. And I was like, hey, Dad, have you ever thought about writing your own science fiction book? He just recently retired, and he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how I'd ever be as good as Arthur C. Clarke. And I'm just like thinking about that. I told him about the gap. And I was like, well, Dad, you just have to start. You just have to do it. I was thinking to myself, man, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Like I've beat myself to hell for not having my art, my astrology, my music be as good as the greatest, in the field, the Beatles or whatever. We can argue on who's the best or not, but people that stood the test of time were very important to me, and I was always comparing my work to that, and that created quite a substantial gap. Same with astrology. I wasn't satisfied with just, magazine horoscopes. Like I wanted I was studying people like Robert Schmidt and Demetra George and people like that who I consider some of the best at what they do. And sometimes we just have to be gentler with ourselves. I think that, yes, greatness requires hard work and almost a sense of dissatisfaction sometimes. But I do think Saturn is going to be teaching us two things. There's two ways that this could go. First of all, it could say, you're chasing a perfection that does not exist in the physical world. And you're never going to be happy unless you find a stopping point and say, this is good enough, right? The other direction that this new moon could go is that we may make a little bit too many assumptions about the skills that we already have. We may actually have a ways to go. We may be a little bit less experienced than we had hoped, and we may be shown that we need some new skills. And that's okay too. Instead of beating ourselves up because we aren't there yet, because the gap isn't closed yet, that's when you just double back and say, okay, I'm not quite ready yet. I was doing that this week. I have a lot of ideas about how I want my fall offerings to go, but honestly, the timing just wasn't right and the project wasn't quite ready to be revealed yet. And that's okay. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, yes, we feel this sense of urgency, especially when we feel like we're in a competitive situation or a competitive field and everyone's signing up and all this and that. But here's the thing. You want to be able to put your best foot forward when you are doing something if it's important to you. And I say this with the hope that if you're listening to this, that you will both try to be patient with your process, but also don't get so perfectionistic about it that you never take the first step. So that's really what I'm trying to go for here. But just talking from my own experience, we're in a balsamic moon phase right now as I'm recording this. And this new moon will be the beginning of a new process. And I think that when we're in like waning moon phases, balsamic moon phases, when we just are coming off of a Mercury retrograde, Mercury's just stationing direct, we had Venus moving out of its fall and into its own domicile. All of those are, I think, conditions for improving our ability to manifest without necessarily having to go back and make a ton of changes. So if you are a student of astrology and you're trying to come up with a new project, it's okay sometimes to be patient if something doesn't seem like the timing is quite right. So I think this is something to consider with this. Raven is saying, with a fifth house Virgo, these art metaphors are hitting close to home. Yeah, wherever we have Virgo in our charts, we can be perfectionistic about things, Raven. From my own experience, I have Virgo in my second house. So when it comes to spending my resources, I go through this really lengthy process of trying to find the best possible use of my resources. And then sometimes, because I have a retrograde Mercury, ruling that, I will second guess when I've actually made a decision and a purchase, and then I get frustrated and dissatisfied, and the whole process starts all over again. So we have to be careful wherever Virgo is in our chart of leaning too harshly into that dissatisfaction. A little bit of dissatisfaction actually drives us to improve. Total dissatisfaction immobilizes us and paralyzes us from doing anything. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing here. What's up, Jennifer? Nice to see you. Stopping in from Michigan. Ani is here today too. Says, good day, Spencer and friends. Light crowd on a holiday weekend. Yes, absolutely. So we're talking about the new moon opposite the Saturn retrograde. And so there are a couple other factors. So I think that we've kind of broken down the Saturn part of it. Saturn can kind of feel like a barrier between closing that gap. If you think about the Pisces 2 area as the magic alchemy that needs to happen to bring a spiritual idea into physical reality, sometimes we just have a blockage within that. And no matter how hard we try, we aren't able to close the gap as well as we would hope. And that might be part of what Saturn retrograde is bringing to us. But what do we do when we come up against Saturnian necessities? Well, we have to have patience. Sometimes we have to let go and change our expectations. Sometimes we have to let the process play out and not force the river. Sometimes we have to grow and mature and let something ferment a little bit longer. Okay. Now, I would also say that we have a mutable T-square for this new moon as well. You can see here we have Jupiter and Mars squaring the new moon by whole sign, as well as that T-square with Saturn. Okay. When we have the first aspect, and I'll show you that in a minute, the moon is going to be exactly squaring Neptune and Mars. So we will take a look at that as well. But I do think that when we have this mutable T-square type energy, we just feel pulled in a lot of different directions. Mars and Jupiter in Gemini are both expanding our pathways that we could decide to follow, but also showing us the necessity of eliminating some of those choices for the specific purpose of infusing our energy into our highest priorities. So I think that sometimes those decisions can be difficult. Sometimes when we're trying to choose what our highest priority is, it's not always an easy choice. But I do think that as we see this new moon unfold, we will see Jupiter ingress into the third decan of Gemini, just as Mars has. And that third decan of Gemini really says, okay, you've explored. You're not going to be able to keep all of these possibilities open. You are going to have to make a choice. And if you think about Gemini 3 as the transition between the final season or decan of spring before the Cancerian summer solstice, there really is a shift in direction. There's a choice that says, okay, this is the growth, exploration, the pollination period is ended. You're going to have to decide which flower you're going to, bear fruit, which flowers will bear fruit, and which ones were infertile. Okay, so that's our mutable T-square that we're going to be dealing with. Okay. So we also have Venus near the south node. And here we have Venus newly ingressed into Libra as I'm recording this, which is super exciting. That is an improvement in Venus's condition, quite an amazing improvement, actually. Venus is in its fall in Virgo, a place that it is very uncomfortable in, and it is in its own domicile in Libra. So all of the Venusian qualities tend to function better when Venus is in Libra. We are much more able to harmonize. A lot of aesthetics come through balance and harmony. We are also able to see someone else's perspective potentially with greater grace and ease. And that can lead to better relationships. If we're constantly focused on our own perspective, that can lead to some disconnects with people. Now, the interesting part about this is that Venus is going to be conjoining the south node. And this is very close to the same degrees that the Sun and Mercury are going to be having a cazimi later on, I believe in the end of September, the very end of September. So I do feel like there is something that we will potentially have to release that is Venusian, where we may become aware of an imbalance. Okay, the first decan of Libra teaches us about awareness of imbalances. It says, okay, here is the work that you have in front of you. The first decan introduces the themes, sometimes through the lack of that particular quality that you're trying to develop over the course of the journey through the sign. So you may see an imbalance that may bring you some frustration. There's a spirit in that decan of Libra called the Uranies, and the Uranies were these monsters that people would pray to be able to get justice for a crime that had gone unpunished. So we may feel a little bit riled up when Venus or any planet goes into the first decan of Libra. But the South Node, I think, is encouraging us potentially two things. It could bring us a situation from the past that needs to be resolved and let go of, through our ability to create peace. It could also encourage us maybe to let go of some of that righteous indignation. I have worked with a number of clients with placements in this first decan of Libra, and a lot of them are very fiery individuals that sometimes they get really, their anger actually gets quite aroused, and it is not necessarily it is something that oftentimes they're angry on someone else's behalf, and an injustice that they're witnessing in society or in relationships or something. It's not even, they're not even necessarily defending their own needs. Does that make sense? So there might be something that where we might have to release some of those feelings, of, well, this isn't fair, and maybe even come to an acceptance that there are some things in life that just aren't fair. We also could be doing the hard work necessary to bring about rebalancing a situation. Okay, so that is Venus near the South Node. So all of those are interesting factors. We will talk about Mercury as the host of this new moon as well in the third 10-degree section of Leo. And I'll go into greater depth in a second with all of these, but the challenge with this is that Mercury is in aversion to this new moon, which means it is not able to witness and provide its resources. We may be desperate to bring something into form, but we may be having difficulty drawing upon what we need to make it a reality. And we may be getting frustrated, we may be getting fixated in a certain belief or trying to stand our ground, or maybe we are, the difficulty that we have in actually bringing something into reality could actually be some pride. Oftentimes when we realize we don't have the skills necessary to do something that we deeply desire, we can try to cover for that by getting a little haughty, right? You've probably known someone or done something like this in the past. I know that has been something that I've fallen victim to in my younger days, where I didn't want to admit that I didn't know something, and then I had to kind of humble myself with it. And that, to me, is part of, I think, this journey here too, is we have to be willing to let go of some of our pride if we want to do a good job. This is something that was really interesting this week, that was a fascinating realization. My partner and I were talking about, potentially living with the challenges of being neurodivergent. In this case, maybe the potential of some ADHD type of qualities. And we were reading about procrastination versus laziness. And in this article, I believe it's David Kane, I think that is the name. And it was talking about that procrastination isn't necessarily laziness. And this is something that people that have struggled with ADHD sometimes get accused of, as being lazy or procrastinating. But this article was talking about people that have some of these neurodivergent challenges, but I think this applies to the greater population as well, is sometimes we can overly identify personally with the art itself. And if we aren't able to do something that is to our taste or to our standard, we take it as this personal affront that we are not of value. Okay? And this is a pretty interesting, and so as I'm talking about this, I'm gonna put that up there. Host, Mercury in Leo 3 in aversion. We mistakenly think that just because we aren't necessarily skilled enough in that moment to bring our vision into reality, that we must be flawed as individuals. And a lot of times when we procrastinate, it's because we're so invested in the project, in the work, that we personally identify with it. And that if we become such a perfectionist around it that we are fearing failure so much that we just push it off and push it off and push it off. I've been very guilty of this in the past. I had such a high standard at various times in my life that I just delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. This was true when I was a musician. I I had an album that came out when I was 34. Now, I had visions for that album since I was 22. So you can do some math there and realize how long I delayed before I actually released quote unquote official music out into the world. And a lot of that was because the standard that I had set for myself was unrealistic, honestly. I go back and I listen to efforts at recording from my 22, 23, 24 age, and they were pretty good. From a 44-year-old perspective, I was like, why was I so hard on myself? There was such energy and passion, and what I was lacking in maybe perfect skill or perfect, pitch, I made up for with gusto and energy and passion and honesty, and it would have been nice. I think I would have had a much larger body of work had I just rolled with it. And I think this is true in anything that we're trying to do. We can delay the process so long because we feel like it has to be up to this certain standard. So I think that the key with this new moon is to not necessarily have to personally identify with the creation itself. I know that that's hard. And I know as an artist, you might be like, well, that's crazy, Spencer. This art is a manifestation of my soul, right? This is my expression of my higher self. And that may be partially true. But think about something that you've made that you are proud of and how many iterations it may have gone through. Was every single iteration an example of your soul? I would argue yes, but if we personally identify with every incomplete version, we'll never keep going, right? We'll give up. That's also a metaphor too for just our lives in general. If we think of ourselves as divine, co-created works of art in process, if we gave up on life when we just didn't get it right the first time, well, we wouldn't be around right now. How many of us have gone through and made mistakes where we just didn't have the right knowledge yet and we had to go through the experience and go through it and learn and make adjustments, etc. So be very careful about over-identifying your sense of worthiness with what you are creating. Okay? That's huge, because the work itself becomes more important than whether you are feeling appreciated, whether you're feeling worthy, some of those things. I got news for you. You're worthy whether you make art or not. Does that make sense? Whether you do anything, whether you do this utilitarian thing the society tells us that we have to do, you're worthy just for the sake of being. And I think that's part of what Saturn teaches us too in Pisces here is, it's okay just to be. And visibility, invisibility, sometimes that just doesn't really matter. What I do experience with Virgo versus Leo is the work itself, the process itself becomes more important than the accolades that you may or may not receive from doing that work. Here's the real lesson of Virgo. Those accolades will come. Like if you're doing great work and you're just doing a high volume of work, eventually people are going to notice. And I think that you don't have to force that. You don't have to get frustrated if people aren't noticing. Just keep on doing more work, because at the end of the day, you have to understand that you are going through this process-orientated thing. So that's Mercury here in Leo, and we'll break this down in a little bit greater depth. I'm just checking in on the chat here. Jennifer says, new moon hitting my Venus, Pluto, and Virgo in the 4th house, opposing Saturn between the moon and Jupiter and Pisces. Yeah, so maybe, Jennifer, you might have that perfectionism applied to your home, your family, your sense of roots. Maybe when you were growing up, you had high expectations placed on you. And oftentimes people that have difficulty with procrastination or perfectionism, a lot of that is rooted in a parental voice that was actually very critical. So this is an opportunity, probably, Jennifer, for learning self-acceptance in that regard as well. Yeah, Jennifer says Mars in the first house squaring the new moon too. Absolutely. Let's see. Yes, we were talking about, yeah, it said made the choice last week to get hospice for my mom finally. Oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer. I know that we've been kind of witnessing that journey with you and your mom, and I know that's a tough position to be in. But I do think that um, just making your mom as comfortable as possible, I think, is the best thing to do at this point. And it sounds like you're doing everything that you is in your power to make that chapter of her life comfortable, and to just appreciate and have gratitude for the time that you have together. Don says hi, and I hear you in spirit. Just had this situation with my daughter, and now I know I need to beg forgiveness and stop saying lazy. Ugh, bad mom moment. Yeah, it's just a really interesting realization, isn't it? Um, I have struggled my entire life with procrastination, and just the light bulb moment of knowing that it part of it is a paralysis due to standard, um, I think can really shift our thinking around it. And yeah, and as parents, when we are perfectionists and procrastinators ourselves, when we see our kids going down a similar journey and a similar path, sometimes that can trigger our own negative inner critic. So I would say this, Don. Just as we are trying to allow ourselves the process of being an artist and making mistakes and doing a lot of work, same thing with being a parent. We're not always perfect parents every time we, interact with our kids. And you always have an opportunity to make changes, to do better, to learn from that interaction, and to make shifts. And hopefully your kids will give you enough grace to understand that you are a human being as well. That's not always the easiest thing too. A lot of times our kids will, because the power dynamic is different, parents have a lot of power when a kid is very young, and there's almost like a deification of parents sometimes, for better or for worse. And one of the hardest things to do as a child, and as children too, we can see this from multiple generational perspectives, is to be able to see our parents as flawed human beings, because we were so dependent on them, and them being functional, right? And when they aren't, that can be very painful. And when they're not perfect, that can be painful too. But that's something that middle age really has taught me, is just that parents aren't perfect, and forgiveness is important. Holding a grudge against your parent for the mistakes they made when they were 20 through 30 or however old they were when you were a young child, that doesn't really serve anybody. I feel like that is an exercise in masochism, right? Because we hold on to these things for so long, and just realizing that we're all trying to do the best we can with the information and the resources that we have in that moment, that to me is giving someone grace. And just as we can give our kids grace and allow them to make mistakes, I think kids should give their parents grace sometimes too, and allow for them to be flawed human beings also. Oh, Steven says he has the new moon the 10th and will oppose his natal sun on the 4th. We've got dueling rising signs here, with Jennifer with the Gemini rising and Steven with the Sag rising. So this might be something with your career, Steven. Something with your public persona. Maybe you have a little bit of a perfectionist streak when it comes to putting your work out into the world. I remember you were doing some writing. I'm curious how that's going. I hope that you're giving yourself some grace with that too. Like I said, I've been talking with my dad about his writing aspirations and encouraging him to do the process rather than compare himself to, the greatest writers of all time. I think it's okay to be inspired by the greats, but feeling like you have to produce work that's comparable to them just from the very start, that's when we get tripped up. And maybe you don't. Maybe we don't achieve the heights of an Arthur C. Clarke or of the Beatles or something like that, depending on whatever our medium is. But that doesn't, if we never try, we're never going to reach our own potential. Steven says, new moon on Labor Day. Yeah, it's a new moon on Monday, like Duran Duran like to sing. New moon on Monday. I like that song. Rachel says, I've had a lot of conversations with my mom about procrastination. She feels so guilty about this quality in herself. But so much research is coming out about how it is a symptom of trauma at times too. Absolutely, Rachel. And that's something to recognize. Oftentimes we are afraid of making a mistake because there were situations in our youth where when we made a mistake, it was dangerous, or we were really criticized heavily for making that mistake. And that's when we start to, feel that that trauma response that we don't even want to engage with it at all. And like I said, that is a difficult thing to parse out. I think what we're seeing too, like as you're pointing out, is just having some forgiveness for ourselves and for others around some of those things is really important. And this whole like utilitarian standard that we hold every single individual to is not always realistic depending on what our circumstances were. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't times when we aren't engaging with something when we need to. Like again, Virgo as a sign, as a place, is not afraid of the hard, dirty work. And that's what we were talking about with the second decan of Virgo being dually ruled by Venus and Saturn in both the Chaldean order method and the triplicity method. So again, Saturn-Venus combination, creating harmony and beauty, but through slow, dirty. Saturn was associated with things that were dirty, right? And like processes that are messy. It's not always going to be this Martha Stewart Pinterest look of things. And to be honest with you, even those things, like I think Martha Stewart's, is she Virgo? She thinks she's she might be a Virgo sun. When they're in process, it's chaotic. I shared a musical interlude on my Instagram to advertise this show today, and I picked Freddie Mercury and a Queen song. And Freddie Mercury has this new moon, 11 degrees, or he would have if he's still with us, exactly on his natal sun. So he embodies this new moon energy. And if you know anything about Queen and the recording process, it's extremely intricate. And there was so much work that went into it. They went over budget, and like he was such a perfectionist that it drove him and other people around him crazy. But he created something really incredible. The other factor I think that I would say about this particular area of Virgo is sometimes we need some solitude to do our work. If we get overly social, we can get distracted. So I've met a lot of people with placements in this decan that are very comfortable being by themselves because the work is more important to them than the socialite life. And I have this, like I said, I keep referring to him. I have this friend in Canada, Toronto, my guy Cypress out there in Toronto, just giving you a shout out. He's an incredible craftsman and just an incredible human being. And I just feel like he feels so confident and comfortable doing the work. And sometimes there's solitude involved with that. And I've just witnessed someone who's so committed to their craft. And it just really embodies that second decan of Virgo to me. If you're listening, Cypress, I hope you're doing well, my friend, my fellow Leo rising. Let's see. Jennifer says, yes, grew up with major criticism. Jennifer is the Gemini rising that has Virgo on the 4th house cusp. Have been working through the last 4 years with parents. We have become closer. So it'll be worth it. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, like just seeing where Virgo is in our charts, we have to recognize those tendencies, right? And it could be through inherited trauma. It could be through just a high standard that was set as well. Steven says Freddie Mercury also has the moon in Sagittarius. Yeah, he's a night birth with the moon in Sagittarius 3. I was looking up his chart recently. Funnily enough, Freddie Mercury and I have the same exact rising sign degree, 21 degrees of Leo. So I've always really resonated with his music. And when I was doing recordings, that was what was so difficult for me in the studio, is my gap, my taste was Freddie Mercury. You know, it was Queen, it was the Beatles, it was these really ornate, lushly layered compositions. And it's really hard to do. If you want to hear some, like my first attempt at something like that, you can go find my album Tightrope Walker on SoundCloud and listen to, especially the tracks Tightrope Walker. I think that was my Elton John, Freddie Mercury-esque thing that got released. I also have this like unreleased track about Lita and the Swan that was very much a Bohemian Rhapsody type of thing. Maybe I'll release that at some point in my life, but neither here nor there. Rachel says, I love how Martha Stewart is letting loose in her elderhood. Like, who cares about folding a fitted sheet? Yeah, right? I mean, the flip side of this Virgo perfectionism is we can be pretty uptight about certain things. And how liberating is it to like just start giving less F's about something? I mean, she has a relationship with someone who seems like he's relaxed 99% of the time. Snoop Dogg, right? They had this really interesting relationship where he's just chilled out. Maybe he had a good influence on her, you know, and she was able to just relax a little bit because he just seems completely nonplussed by anything. So yeah, really interesting to see our journeys and how they shift over time. Yeah, Steven says it's a beautiful thing, right? Absolutely. Okay, so that's sort of the overview. Let's just take a look here at some of the slides and get a little bit of a deeper understanding. So this is my Decans of Virgo webinar that's on sale right now. So if you want to pick that up, check it out on the spencermichaud.com. And we've got the sun and the moon in the second decan of Virgo. And just some more details around this second decan. We've got a figure who is in their garden, this lush garden on the Nine of Pentacles card that is syncretized with this new moon. And it's called the Lord of Material Gain, or just the Lord of Gain in Book T and Book of Thoth. Austin Coppock calls it the hammer and the anvil, a reference to Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods. And there's a spirit in this decan called the Moirai, or the daimon, the Moirai, who were the arbitrators of fate. Okay, so they were weavers of fate. So this is the where sometimes we get the themes of weaving intention, spirit, into a physical form. So the Moirai were said to be, you know, weavers of our fate as mortals. Okay, so themes of process and production, binding essence into matter, unification, beauty, and balance through hard, dirty work, concealment, behind the scenes labor. It's important, behind the scenes labor. You know, oftentimes you see the final production of something that is released, but you don't see all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. But another Virgo, I believe he might be a Virgo too also, is Michael Jackson. He just had a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday. 66, Michael Jackson, if he'd been alive today. That guy just worked and worked and worked. And a lot of his work ethic and perfectionism was absolutely born through trauma, because he had a really difficult childhood where his dad set the expectations so high and tried to get him to conform through violence, right? That he carried that into his adulthood, and he just worked and worked and worked. But he's an example of this Pisces Virgo axis. Sometimes if you have too heavily of an influence in Virgo, you can get a little stiff. You're overthinking things. Michael Jackson was born on a full moon in Pisces, okay? And he had that Virgo sun, but he had the Pisces moon, so he was able to surrender. When he was performing, he was surrendering to the moment on stage, and that made him an incredible creative performer and someone who, man, I'm always kind of in awe of Michael Jackson. I've gone through a lot of periods of studying him and his work, and He's a complicated figure for sure. I'm not here to make judgments on his failings, which potentially could have been numerous and quite dark. But just if we're able to separate the man from the art that he created an incredible body of work, and he was something that we hadn't seen, I think, in a very long time. Like he had started to reach a deified status, or a semi deified status. So this is the interesting place where we just have to do a lot of work, but also know when to let go and let spirit complete the process. So weeding out inefficiencies is something that's important in the second decan of Virgo. Here you see in that card a falcon, right? A hooded falcon. And falconry, you're weeding out the vermin in the garden with that falcon. And sometimes it's a messy, violent process, but we're not seeing that process in the card. What we're seeing is the grace that comes when we revealed the beautiful piece of art. Solitude and self-reliance. We've talked about that as well. Sometimes to do a lot of good, hard, artistic work, you need to have the proper space to do that. I have talked about that with guitar students in the past. I said, do you have a place you can go where you can make noise and make mistakes without people judging you? And oftentimes they don't, and that's a problem. And that's an impediment to getting the work done. So I often encourage them to find a space where they can be by themselves, where they don't worry about being criticized or bothering others. Susanna, thank you so much for the super sticker, my friend. Appreciate you. I hope that you're doing well and that we're maybe a soundtrack today to your creative process. If you didn't know, Susanna is an incredible painter and musician. Right? Susanna is like a creative powerhouse. Her and her daughter and her husband are all very creative people and productive. Check out Susanna's work over there as well. Susanna Falaja, I believe it is, PHLJA something. Sorry, there's a lot of consonants in that the English American language doesn't always have the Nordic Finnish spelling and conjugation of verbs. But check out Susanna's work; it's pretty awesome. Julien's here too. It says, hi Spencer, 21 Leo, Sabian, a carrier pigeon delivering a messages, a mission, counseling, bridging, and mediating. I know that you may not study them, but interesting. Hope you are well. Yes, that's excellent, and hopefully I'm doing some of those things today. I have studied the Sabian symbols a little bit too. It's not a main feature of my work, but in addition to that 21 Leo Sabian symbol that I resonate deeply with, my 15-degree Cancer sun is a person studying a mandala, okay, a circle, with the help of a very ancient book. So think about that. So what are we doing here today? We're studying these astrological mandalas and drawing upon this ancient wisdom. And I believe my moon sign is a professor fails to interest his students in ancient knowledge or something like that. Something that like kind of reads me to filth. It's like, oh, okay, you're trying to get people interested in all this, but you're having difficulty doing so. So, yeah, it's really fascinating. Julian says, astrology, Cancer 15. Yes, it's my sun, moon, midpoint. Howdy, neighbor. Yeah, nice to see you, Julian. Hope you're doing well. Over there in Arizona. Football season's coming up. Cardinals, right? Jennifer says, Michael Jackson was incredible. Watched him grow up. Yeah, that was one of the things I was meditating on today, was thinking about someone who was so prodigious and was so good at such a young age, but then actually grew into his incredible potential and promise. Okay, like if you would look at Michael Jackson as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, you'd probably say, wow, that dude sounds like an old man, and he is incredible dancing and singing. He's probably going to be pretty amazing when he actually like grows up and comes into his own. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. There's just factors like maybe people rest on their laurels and then they don't actually fulfill their incredible potential. Maybe life throws them a bum hand or something like that. But Michael Jackson, he delivered on his incredible promise as a young person and was even better as an adult. So it is just an incredible journey. I really have a lot of respect for him as an artist. And again, I understand that he's a problematic figure socially, and his personal life has some potential pitfalls for sure. And I'm not condoning what may or may not have been his behavior in that regard. But just strictly as an artist and strictly as an artistic process, one of the great artists of the 20th century, and a great example of Virgo work ethic combining with Piscean flow state. Yeah, there you go. Susanna Pelagia, right? It means rowan in English. Ooh, the tree with the orange berries. Nice, very cool. Beautiful trees, yes. Yeah, check her out, Susanna Pelagia. Steven says Michael Jackson was in the spotlight since Jackson 5. Absolutely. Yeah, he was thrust into that spotlight. It wasn't really a choice for him, but he was obviously destined for something. Like his chart is really interesting. We'll have to break his chart down at some point. Okay. So, questions you can ask yourself about just the sun and the moon in this area, this area of the zodiac. How does this project, relationship, physical process that you're going through, how does it need to be refined? How can you weed it of the inefficiencies, right? How do you weed out the vermin that are threatening the process? What physical sacrifices are necessary to infuse essence into form? That's very important, right? Oftentimes we don't understand what we're trading sometimes for an artistic process. Michael Jackson traded his childhood and traded his innocence for his, skill. And Michael Jackson's an interesting meditation. I often wonder, was it worth it? Was his suffering worth the love that he created through his art and his music? Was his suffering, or the suffering that he, may have inflicted on others? That is not an easy question to answer. My first inclination would be no, but I really love that music, and he made a lot of people happy for a long period of time. He also probably made a lot of people very unhappy. So not one for me to judge, but an interesting meditation nonetheless. Julene says, football, yes, all good. Just over here, knee deep in mutable shit show, right? Jupiter's taking me off the ledge. Oh, Julene. Julene's got a lot of Gemini placements, right? Gemini rising. So the Mars-Jupiter stuff is probably taking you in a lot of different directions. Thank you so much, Julene, for your super sticker. Appreciate you. It's always so generous in the chat. Thank you so much for your generosity today, my friend. And Jennifer says, absolutely, right? We're talking about Michael Jackson. So other ways that you can meditate on this new moon. How do I work with humility and devotion behind the scenes? How do we do the work that's necessary to get from point A to point B, right? How do we delay gratification until the work is done? Ooh, that's a hard one. This is something that I think is important. This is a realization that I've had around doing the work. Oftentimes, you can get the same positive reinforcement talking about a project that you want to do with somebody and them being excited about it than if you were to actually do the project and then reveal it later. And this is something I've really had to work on, because I get excited about something and I start talking about it, and then the impetus, the motivation starts to wane. So I think that one of the other things that you can do with this is protect your project. You don't have to tell everybody everything that you're doing all the time. Just get to work, just get down to business. And sometimes not telling people about it actually delays the feedback that you would get from actually doing it, right? And that can be really important to actually completing the process. And then finally, how do you create space in your life to focus on the project at hand? This is a super important part of being an artist, is how do you carve out space to do the work. All right. And it's not always easy to do. A lot of times we have family obligations. You know, we're taking care of others. We have kids. We have aging parents. We have, you know, whatever, friends that we're renting an apartment with and they're noisy or whatever it is. And it takes a lot of courage to communicate with people in your life in a gentle way to say, hey, you know what I really need right now from you in our relationship? I need some space to work on my stuff. It's not that I don't care about you. It's not that I don't want to be with you. It's just that I need some space to work on my stuff. And I need some forgiveness if I make some noise or if I make a mess. This is a really important thing that I worked with my guitar clients. Oftentimes they were so afraid of bothering their significant others that they just were so quiet. And that I was trying to get them to be loud. I wanted them to make the mistake loud. I had this problem when I was a teenager. I had a Virgo stepmom, and my Virgo stepmom really liked quiet, probably because she was very creative and didn't want to be distracted by my, Fender Telecaster blasting out, electric guitar all day long, because I was obsessed with it and I wanted to play it all the time and I wanted to play it loud. And we had a lot of battles around volume levels. And in my adulthood, I can definitely appreciate her perspective a lot more at this point. But back then, as a teenager, I just felt like she doesn't care about me and like blah, blah, blah. And she's trying to, shroud my light and all this and that. And we had a lot of battles about it. What it ended up doing is it gave me a little bit of a complex about singing or playing loudly. And it took me a number of years to allow myself the grace to be able to do things with the volume necessary and the breath support necessary to sing loud enough, right? Just because of that experience. So a great gift that you can give your partners if they want to be artistic is space as well, and some accident forgiveness and some mess forgiveness, okay? All right, so that's the sun and moon in Virgo part of this. I just wanted to bring this to the screen too. I want to talk just a little bit about, let's go back to the Saturn part of it. So here is the opposite, Pisces 2. And before I talk about Pisces 2, do me a huge favor, friends. If you haven't already, please like the video, okay? Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. If you want to make a supporting donation, a gift to the channel, you can buy me a super chat today while we're live, or you can go to buy me a coffee and make a donation there. Sign up for a reading. Thank you so much for everyone who has helped support the channel here today. Appreciate you. Go check out the Decans of Virgo. I share a lot of my slides here and I talk about a lot of those things, but we go in even more depth. And I'm not the type of person that wants to hide away all my best stuff all the time. I talk about a lot of my stuff here, but it really does go a long way to supporting the work that I'm doing if you go and like purchase a webinar or something like that. So let's talk a little bit more about the Saturn part of this, okay? So Pisces 2, you see a man that's seated and his arms are folded in this very self-satisfied position. So we are dealing with this energy of satisfaction. If we feel a dissatisfaction with some Virgo placements, here the opposite is like, that's good enough. Like, bless my Piscean father. He's been a model for good enough. For moderation, for saying, you know what, that's good enough. He has some challenges in his chart too. He has Jupiter and Virgo also. So I inherited that from him. We both have Jupiter and Virgo. So while there's some parts of his life that he's just like super chill about, there's other parts when it comes down to his own creative works, he's just as self-critical as anyone else. So, but if you think about what Saturn is the pressure it's putting on this new moon, it is the difficulty of overestimating your ability, right? Of getting this kind of wishful thinking. I think that really what we're going to have to do here with Saturn is be a little bit realistic about our skills, okay? So I just wanted to show you this and kind of talk about this a little bit. The daimon in this decan is Dolos, which is an apprentice to Prometheus. And there's also stories of Phaethon in this decan as well, like the son of Helios, the sun god, who both of these were people that wanted to fly basically before they were ready. Phaethon wanted to fly the chariot of the sun. Dolus wanted to create humanity out of clay like his master Prometheus, but wasn't as skilled or ready, and then ran out of clay. And one was Prometheus's version of humanity was called aletheia, truth, and Dolus's was called pseudologos, or falsehood. And the truth can run because it's supported by fact. A falsehood will always get tripped up because it doesn't have legs to stand on, right? So we have to be realistic about our abilities. I think that that's really the message here. If we overestimate our abilities, we will never get where we want to be because we've gotten satisfied to the point where we're not improving anymore. And that's really important. And it's easy to get into that. Life throws us a lot of curveballs. Sometimes it's just enough to get up and get dressed and do the basic things we need to do for life. The thought of like doing more work and self-improvement takes a distant second to just the basic, day-to-day habits of life that, in this modern society can be really difficult and really exhausting. So I would also not self-eviscerate if you have trouble with some of these things. I think it's just about taking one step towards it, one small step, right? One small step, and you'll be amazed at how much energy that can actually bring you. Now, I'll just show you a couple other things briefly. If we talk about the Venus South Node in Libra, here's the decan, the Two of Swords, okay? The awareness of an other, awareness of what is fair, ethical breaches. We've talked about the Uranus. There's a fixed star in this decan called Diadem, which is the crown of Coma Berenices, the hair piece, really, the hair that was sacrificed by Berenices to Aphrodite for the safe return of her husband from war. So we will be seeing in the weeks ahead potentially maybe a sacrifice that we have to make for the family to restore some balance. So think about that so that you can find this in the decans of Libra. And then finally, if we talk just a little bit about the Mercury in Leo, here is the third decan of Leo, with it consecrated with and syncretized with the Seven of Wands. And this is where we're defending a position that is important to us. We're defending our authenticity. We have an unbreakable will, they would say, for better or for worse. And sometimes we have to make a Herculean effort. So there's also a possibility with this new moon that we feel like we have to make this Herculean effort to get something done right now, and that can tax our physical form. I'm just looking around my office right now because if you've been following along with the channel, a lot of my summer has been surrounding this collecting bug. I've collected these cards that I was really interested in. They're Lord of the Rings, and I kind of went a little nuts with it. And now I have a lot of these things and a lot of duplicates, and the task of organizing all of it and getting rid of the excess and selling the excess is a daunting task in my brain right now. It's like, oh my God, I've got so much work to do. And I've got all sorts of other work to do, like for my job and my house and all of these things. But I think that yesterday I did a little bit of organizing, and you'd be amazed at when you just sit down and just do a little bit at a time, it can really give you confidence, and it can start to unlock some of the tension that you might feel when you're pulled in a lot of different directions. And I think that knowing that Mercury in this decan might be encouraging us to make this Herculean effort. It may not be real. Like it may be that it's okay to do a little bit and then pace yourself. I think that's an important lesson in this new moon as well. Jennifer says, listening to Joseph Campbell, he was definitely a hero archetype. Yeah, I love Joseph Campbell. I did it really got me into myth, and the power of myth. His talks with Bill Moyers were really instrumental for me learning about stories. Julene says, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo placements, nicely formed T-square to my ascendant. Oh, Julene, you're probably being pulled in so many different directions. And football season's starting, right? I hope your grandson is doing okay, and that everything's going well with him, and he's doing well. I hope that he's healthy, and I haven't heard an update with him in a while. He's an excellent offensive lineman, and has a lot of potential, but seems like a genuinely nice young gentleman as well. Steven says he has Pisces, Virgos, and Sag placements here too. We've got all these mutable T-square people, right? Yeah, everybody's, we've got the mutable support club today. Looks like us T-squares are here in for quite a challenge in perspectives. Absolutely. Julian says, you just described my chart, Leo moon, along with the mutables, right? Yeah, so there is that pride that we have around making these Herculean efforts. We just have to be flexible. And I relate, Julian. My ascendant is in this decan of Leo. And sometimes I feel like I have to be all or nothing with things. And that's just not true all the time, right? It's just not how reality works. Nature isn't necessarily all or nothing all the time. Nature is a slow process. Yeah, Raven's another Pisces, Virgo, Sag, and Gemini. We've got the people that are coming to these things regularly lately have been the mutable T-square grand crosses that are like, please, Spencer, tell me what the hell is going on, because my life is just flipped upside down right now. So I'll do the best that I can, but it's just funny to see all of you here today like that. Oh, but we'll get through it. Okay. So, friends, let's go back to the chart, and what I will do now is I'm just going to take you through some of the week ahead with this. So the first thing that I think that we haven't discussed about the new moon is that on the 3rd, okay, let's go back a day. On the 3rd, we have Mars perfecting a square to Neptune. All right? So here's the Mars-Neptune square. And that is Mars at 28 degrees, 29 degrees it will be. Whoops. Here's the outer one is the aspects. So 28, 29 degrees, we have Mars squaring Neptune. So that's another part of this new moon that we have to be aware of, is we may be not necessarily having a clear picture of how our will should be directed. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, Mars often represents the direction of our will. It can talk about conflicts that can be confusing as well. So that could be a problem here too, is we want to get started on something but we just don't even know where to begin. This feels like Mars squared Neptune. And we are trying to figure out, what sacrifices are we willing to make? Like, which of these things can we sustain for the long term? Like, this has been a big question that I've had in my own life here, is as I'm deciding on what my offerings are going to be for the fall, I have 3 or 4 things that I would really like to do right now. The question that keeps coming up is, which of these can I sustain over the entire season coming ahead? And which of the things I'm just not going to be able to do? Like, I've been really interested in this program over at Pacifica Graduate Institute recently. There's like an ecotherapy program that I've been really fascinated with since I've started reading Braiding Sweetgrass, and talks about connecting people with nature and therapeutic value and the spiritual value with that. And it looks really awesome. But I'm going through it, I'm thinking like, man, I just don't know if I can do that and do all the classes that I want to design and offer at the same time. And it's, those are the choices that you have to make. And I have a desire to do some things personally with my home and things like that too. I think that one of the things that we're having to think about at this new moon, especially with Mars squaring Neptune, which of these projects can live? Like, if you think about the story of Castor and Pollux, the twins of Gemini, one of them had to sacrifice part of their immortality so that the other could live again after he had perished. So if you think about this, oftentimes the challenge with that, I'm talking to all you Geminis out there, is you feel like you can't commit to something because that means that you are letting go of an option forever. And that's where the ambiguity comes a lot of times with Gemini. you're like, oh, I'm closing the door to this option. And I would fight back from a Cancerian perspective, the sign right after. And I would say, if you are committed to nurturing something to full fruition, you can't do everything all at the same time. That doesn't mean you can't swing back around to it. And it doesn't mean that that door is permanently closed, although there will be situations where we are at crossroads and we can't go back. That is true. But I think that I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. If something is truly meant to be in your life, it will come back around. I have a feeling, as I've been thinking more about it, that program would be awesome for me. But what I can do is I can just look at the reading list that they have listed on there, buy the books, do it on my own time frame, save myself $900, and still get the benefit of that program, and have time, okay, to design my own programs. But you might have something in your life where it might be confusing, where you're like, well, which of these options is the best for me? So keep in mind that Mars is going to move out of that square with Saturn and with Neptune, and it's going to move into Cancer shortly after that, which can destabilize Mars a little bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So that is Mars on the 3rd squaring Neptune. That is a factor in this new moon. I'm checking in on the chat here. Raven says, yes, please help us. LOL, right? Yeah, I hear you, Raven. It is a lot. Life can be a lot sometimes, but you got this. You got a good head on your shoulders, my friend. Steven says, I was born with a T-square in my chart. It seems natural, right? Well, our charts always seem kind of natural for us because we've really never known anything else, right? So we've lived through that lens our entire life. So it's understandable. But this is the beauty of astrology, is being able to see things through the lens of maybe someone else's perspective. I know that is really, astrology has really helped me have a lot of compassion for other people and a lot of forgiveness on some level. There are some things that I still have to work on. There's some things that bug me and that I still have trouble letting go of. But here's the thing. I'm still a human being in process, just as we all are. So T-squared. T-square Steven. Sunny D is here. It says 6 mutable planets in Gemini rising here. We got all of our Gemini risings and mutable risings, mutable T-squares present in the chat and accounted for. So Sunny D, I hope you're doing well and hope this has been helpful for you here today. Stellar Rendition is here. It says Aquarius 3 rising, and I too struggle with the all or nothing dynamic. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, interesting that is on the axis, right? The Leo 3, Aquarius 3 axis. I've often found that when we have those opposites, oftentimes the themes are somewhat similar, but we're just taking a little bit of a different approach. But that all or nothing dynamic can be really challenging. And I will say this, the Leo 3 all or nothing dynamic can be like, I'm going to stand my ground no matter what. And the Aquarius 3 dynamic can be like, I need to get out of this situation no matter what. So that can be the difference between those sometimes. And your mileage may vary with that. Julene says, oh, yes, this is about your grandson. Says he's doing good. The team is passing around a virus. Oh, no, yucky. He injured his knee first game, so out this week, but he's okay. Chop blocks are his nemesis. He's mutable, too, as you know. Yeah, chop blocks, I believe they've outlawed that in the NFL. So not great for your health, especially if you're 6'7", 320 pounds or whatever he is now. That's a long way to fall to the ground if someone tries to take your legs out from under you. So I hope that he heals up and that he has a great season. Okay, so let's keep going with just the unfolding of this. So we've talked about the Mars, Neptune. We also have that same day. That's when Venus is going to be conjoining the South Node. We've talked about that. So here it is, but there it is perfecting. So the 3rd is going to be the Mars-Neptune square, and then Venus conjoining the South Node. So I think this is an opportunity to maybe, release some expectations around some things, to say, we only can do so many things if we want to do them well. And I'll tell you what, Virgo wants to do things well. So the challenging things with the squares from Gemini is you aren't going to be able to put your full attention and effort into every single pathway if you want to do it well. Okay? If you try to spread your energy too thin, something is going to suffer. And that is probably the choice that we're going to have to make to really do this new moon effectively. And we may have to release some of our expectations and maybe even release some ideals of what is fair and what isn't, all right, with the South Node Venus coming together as well. When we get to the 4th, then we have the first aspect of the moon, okay, after it is released from the bond. Okay, so this is a condition where when the sun and moon separate by 15 degrees, it's in Hellenistic astrology, it's said to be released from the bond. And you think of when the period of conjunction is like an infusing of energy and light into the moon, when it's in that conjunction and opposition, that bond is in opposition as well. When it's released from the bond, it has absorbed that light and it's able to begin manifesting. The interesting thing that we see in the sky is that we start to see the crescent moon appear. We start to literally see a visible moon after we see that separation of 15 degrees, because that is the amount of degrees that the sun will block out the moon or the planets, right? So this is sort of like the moon emerging from the beams. And the first aspect that it makes can be very telling into the type of experience we might have with this. Now, technically, I believe the first aspect was in opposition with Neptune. So flavor that in there. But since this is a Hellenistic technique, I always like to use Hellenistic planets for the first aspect. And that aspect is a square with Mars. So the 3rd decan of Virgo, where the moon is at 29 degrees of Virgo, is concerned with passing on a legacy and saying, okay, you're doing the hard work, now how are you going to pass this on? And with the square to Mars, we have to make a choice. If you're going to pass on a legacy, you have to decide, you have to say, this is what my highest priority is, let's go forward, okay? So there could be a little bit of tension about that, but it's temporary. The moon's going to move into Libra, it's going to conjoin Venus shortly after that. Mars is going to move into Cancer. You're going to decide what your highest priority is, and then it's hopefully all systems go. Okay. Julian says, that's so true, Spencer. My Virgo stellium has high expectations, but argues with my Saturn opposition in the 10th. It can feel like frozen in fear of failure. Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon. I think that we are a lot harder on ourselves than you think. And if we can identify when we're doing that, I think it's easier to give ourselves grace, right? Let's see. So that's our first aspect, the square with Mars. You know, a choice. One option has to be let go of. You just aren't going to be able to do everything. Again, you can circle back to it later, but if to do the things that you want to do, you have to make a choice. Now on the 4th, as well, the same day, Mars is going to be ingressing into Cancer. So you can see this is a few hours later. After we've made that choice, there's Mars moving into Cancer. This is an extended period of time for Mars in Cancer, because at the end of the year we will have a retrograde. We will have Mars moving out of bounds from the 6th to the 18th. So we get like 2 days of Mars being in bounds in Cancer, showing us some of the challenges of that potentially. Now, one of the things about Mars in Cancer is that a planet will tend to use the resources of the sign that it's in. And in this case, it's the resources of the moon, things that we normally would look to for stability and security. It also is related to the body. The moon's related to the body. So this could be a challenging thing for our physical energy, health, etc. This could be challenging for our families. If there is a challenge that you're trying to overcome with Mars and Cancer, you're going to have to be really patient with it, because it is not going to be easily resolved. And if you feel like you have resolved it once Mars moves into Leo, well, Mars is going to retrograde, back into Cancer later on. So just kind of buckle in for a lengthy Mars transit with Cancer and Leo. And when Mars moves out of bounds, this is another instance where we are potentially experiencing some conflict, arguments, erratic energy levels. Energy levels are already erratic in Cancer. Remember, Cancer is the crab. It goes one step forward, two steps back, sideways, left, right, and Mars wants to go directly towards what it wants. One of the challenges of Mars in Cancer is indirect motion. And let's say we do indirect motion in a conflict situation. Well, that's when we could become passive aggressive, right? That's when we're brooding and pouting, and when we're getting angry about something that is unrelated to the thing we're actually upset about. That we have to be really careful of that. And when Mars is out of bounds, it is even more unpredictable. So be very careful about a few things. First of all, be careful about burning yourself out physically. You have to really regulate your energy levels during Mars in Cancer and Mars out of bounds. Be very careful about conflicts that arise within your places of security. When Mars is out of bounds, sometimes those conflicts can escalate to a very difficult point to come back from. I think it is easy to get into a conflict where things are said or done that people regret, and that will take much longer to unravel than if Mars had been in bounds and you could just let it go. You're going to have to be very cognizant of that. And this is going to be a couple weeks. The 6th through the 18th, Mars is going to be out of bounds from 1 degree to 8 degrees of Cancer. So this could be this could play out in our one-on-one relationships as well, because the first decan of Cancer is related to the 2 of Cups. So these very personal, intimate relationships. So just be real careful about that, right? That's just a warning. When we get to the 7th, we're going to be seeing Mercury squaring Uranus retrograde, right? So here's Mercury in the final degrees of Leo. And this is, I believe, the last time this does this year. We've had this happen, this Mercury-Uranus square, like 4 times this year or something like that. Just some maybe shocking communications. Again, all of those things that we talked about with Leo 3, defending something that is important to us, defending a position of power. Sometimes Uranus in Taurus 3 is going to say, this is just out of your control. You don't have the ability to defend yourself because you're dealing with a force of nature, okay? And that's an important lesson. It's knowing when to step down off of that defensive position and surrender in humility to the natural forces that if you continue to contend with are probably going to overwhelm you. All right? And then we're just going to go a speed run through the rest of these things here. We've got on the 8th, I've talked about each of these aspects in depth in the astrology of September, but I just wanted to kind of give you some extra reflections in the context of this new moon. So on the 8th, we have the Sun opposite Saturn. Okay, this is a peak moment, I think, in the month and in the lunar cycle, right? Because this is where some of our frustration that we might have had an initial feeling about with Virgo new moon is probably going to hit a wall. Like this is probably one of the moments where we're going to feel like, oh man, I wanted to get this particular thing done, but I'm coming face to face with my limitations. So this is a period of time to be gentle with yourself, to realize if you let's say you need some more skill, to be humble enough to admit that, to be happy with a slower unfolding or a slower process. That could be part of it. These are all a lot of the challenges that we might be experiencing with the Sun-Saturn opposition. It's coming together on the 8th. Devin's here. What's up, Devin? Devin Malone says, good afternoon, Spencer and friends. Nice to see you, Devin. We're breaking down the details of the new moon in Virgo. Okay, so we also have Mercury on the 9th ingressing back into Virgo. Now, I think this is really good news, because this is, instead of having that new moon in aversion to Mercury and not having the resources it needs to do the work that it needs to do, Mercury coming back to Virgo says, here is all the skills that you need. Here's what you need to learn. Here are the materials that you need to learn. Now go out and facilitate this. I do think this is a big improvement in the energy of the cycle. I think that this is going to be a real boost to our energy around this new moon and its unfolding. The challenge, I mean, as you can see here, as Mercury moves into Virgo, it's squaring the moon in Sagittarius. So it's not going to come without its own challenge, but this is getting us closer to the first quarter moon. So Mercury is going to square that moon in Sagittarius, and the moon in Sagittarius 1, wants to move quickly. So what I would say when you get to the 9th, just slow down. I know you want to move. You're like, oh, I've got all the resources I need now. Mercury's in Virgo, but you're going to have a balance between the very detailed, process orientated thing and seeing how it fits within the bigger picture. Okay. Like every time we're working on a project, it is valuable to be able to zoom out and say, all right, is this going the way that it needs to go? Am I heading in the right direction? Am I still heading towards my target? One of the things I've noticed with Virgo is it's easy to get sidetracked on smaller parts of a project and put so much time and energy into it that you're missing the big picture. This was so true for me when I was doing music in the studio. I would get so fixated on one particular vocal line that I would spend so much time on it that I was burning through expensive hours of studio time and not really getting closer to the end result. And this was something that's true of like Freddie Mercury, who has the sun at 11 degrees of Virgo. He went so vastly over budget on those Queen albums. Now, he achieved something great, but it came at a cost. So you have to think about what the cost is to that and how can you continue to move towards your vision. And as Stephen pointed out earlier, Freddie had a moon in Sagittarius. So he like Michael Jackson, had an interesting balance between his mercurial planets and his Jupiterian ones. He had both the vision, Sagittarius, and the ability to do the hard work to manifest that vision. So that brings us to our first quarter moon. And our first quarter moon happens on the 11th. Okay, so here is the 11th, 9/11, where we have, and let's go to the aspect. Let's go to the sun square the moon. There it is. So that's 19 degrees of Sagittarius. The sun is going to square the moon from 19 degrees of Virgo. So this is that decan of Sagittarius talks about unifying body and spirit to achieve the goal and overcoming a nemesis or something that challenges your vision. So I do think that this is a point in the process where we may be having to test our mettle and test our will and develop a can-do mindset to overcome the impediments to our chosen projects. And sometimes that just comes through sheer will, force of will. Sometimes it comes through our enthusiasm. Sometimes it comes through understanding how far we have to go to achieve the goal. So this, I think, is an important inflection point within the lunar cycle. You can also see that Jupiter has now moved into the third decan of Gemini. And that really shifts the energy of Jupiter. And we have the moon opposing that newly ingressed Jupiter into the third decan. Okay, so again, another point. This is a big T-square. So this is not just the first quarter moon. This is the first quarter moon with a big old T-square with Jupiter, honestly, and a big grand cross with Saturn. It's not going to be exact with Saturn, but it's still in the conversation. So you will probably have another moment of choice where you say, you can't keep expanding the pathways. You can't keep making this project bigger and bigger and bigger. If you want to achieve this goal, you are going to have to choose one particular path. And I think this is another moment where to be able to get something across the finish line, this is going to be an important part of this process. And then we have Mars at the bending of the nodes on the 15th. Now this is an important point in the Mars cycle because this is a crossroads moment for Mars in the Cancer journey. And you can see that it's squaring the North and South node in Aries and Libra. And this is a turning point. This is a turning point where I think we may be getting to the limit of our ability to act completely under our own power independently. And we may be feeling very attached to our self-identities and being able to say, I can do this by myself. I don't need any help. But I think that this moment, as it starts to move towards the South Node in Libra, may be a moment to say, hey, maybe I need some help. Maybe it's okay to get a little bit of assistance. Maybe it's okay to work on this with a partner and get another opinion. And I think that there's no shame in that. So I think that this is a good moment to be able to ask for help if you need it. If you're having a conflict with a family member or something, maybe you can't resolve it on your own, and maybe you need a third party, an objective third party or something to help move you forward within the process. So again, Mars is at the bending of the nodes is a turning point, a crossroads. Okay, and then finally, this gets us to our lunar eclipse. Okay, so this is the full moon of this particular new moon, and it's at 25 degrees of Pisces, in a very tight application to Neptune. So we're going to have to ask ourselves what we're willing to sacrifice to get this legacy passed on. Okay, what are we willing to give up? What are the third decan of Pisces is a Mars-ruled face of Pisces that says, are you willing to go on the religious crusade to get your highest belief manifested, the greatest rainbow of your your vision manifested into reality? So this eclipse could be showing us a preview of the next chapter where we may be trying to balance our desire to pass on a legacy to our need to accept things and to accept that we're all going to return back to source, and we're all one, right? Because we're going to have a new cycle of eclipses over the Virgo Pisces axes. We do have one or two more potentially eclipses in Libra. We have a new moon solar eclipse in Libra in October. But this will be the first in that Virgo Pisces area of the zodiac, just giving us a little taste of the new themes that we might be working on. So we'll talk about that in more depth as we get along in the process. I'll do an entire live stream on the full moon lunar eclipse in a few weeks. So that should get you towards that point in time, hopefully. All right. How are my mutable peeps doing out there? You guys got at least some kind of game plan, potentially? All right. So here we are going to look at the hexagram. We got a hexagram here. And it is hexagram number 4. I thought this was just perfect for the opposition, the new moon opposition with Saturn. And it translates to inexperience, youthful inexperience, innocence, also ignorance, immaturity, youthful folly, wisdom not yet revealed, the young shoot, beginner's luck. It very much talks that this hexagram is like the Sorcerer's Apprentice manifest. Okay, so I'm going to read from Jack Balkin's book here, which I think has great wisdom for us. So this hexagram is called Meng, M-E-N-G. It says, Meng describes a situation in which you have limited experience and do not know how to deal with the situation before you. Whether you realize it or not, you need to seek help. Sound like the Mars at the bending of the nodes, anyone? Okay. But the instruction is useless unless the pupil understands the need for instruction and is genuinely willing to learn. Okay, important. We don't want to get overconfident. That's what Saturn is teaching us, to release the overconfidence. That is why the text says that the teacher does not seek the youth must seek the teacher. Conversely, if you have been approached for help, remember that you cannot teach a person who is not yet ready to listen and learn. Do not be ashamed to admit that the complications in the situation are beyond your control and that you do not know all the answers. Rather, try to see this as an opportunity to expand your vision and your experience. Open your mind and put aside preconceptions and prejudices. Remember that your goal is to learn, not to show off what you already know. Combine eagerness to learn with modesty and humility. In this way, you will maximize the benefits of your education. Okay, so that is the hexagram number 4 that we're going to be dealing with. Now we've got 2 changing lines with that. Okay, 2 changing lines. So we'll talk about that. So the first changing line says, trapped in foolishness and ignorance, this brings humiliation. So here's the warning, and then it gives us the solution in the next changing line. It says, it is important to face reality and deal with things as they are. You must not allow yourself to be overtaken by your fantasies. Okay? Remember, we have Neptune opposite this full moon too, right? Mars square Neptune, fantasy. It says you must not allow yourself to be overtaken by your fantasies or confused and tormented by your obsessions and fears. The more you cling stubbornly to what is not real, the greater the danger that you will meet with humiliation. Okay, so Saturn is the ultimate reality check, friends. And Saturn in Pisces is a little bit uncomfortable because a lot of times that is where our dreams live. That is where our visions live. And when Saturn's going through that, it brings a great dose of cold water to our visions, our dreams, and our realities. But it's there for a reason, you know? And if we lean too heavily into that Mars-Neptune square, we could overestimate our abilities. We could try to do too many things. I'm here to tell you, don't spread yourself too thin during this lunar cycle. It's really important. I'm telling this especially to myself because I'm feeling the same mutable pull that all of you are. I have a million things I want to do right now, but we just can't do all of them and do them well. So pick some things that are important to you and then pour your entire heart into it, okay? The 5th line says, childlike innocence brings good fortune. Now this says the innocence of a child is accepting and sincere. If you are humble and unassuming and seek help and advice from others, you will succeed. Be open-minded and willing to learn, and all will be well. So this is really just telling us to be open and say, hey, it's okay to admit that you don't know something. It's okay to go be in process. That's going to be much more successful, or you're going to have more successful outcomes if you just surrender to the process. Pisces is a sign associated with surrender. Saturn in Pisces says you don't have any choice but to surrender. It's not like you're just like choosing to do this. It says, well, I'm going to throw impediments in your way until you surrender and until you learn this lesson. And if you keep butting your head against this brick wall, you're going to continue to suffer until you get the lesson. Saturn's the immovable object, right? So surrender is the lesson with that, and being able to be willing to be taught, like this hexagram is talking about. Now, there is another hexagram, number 6, and that is conflict. And I have a feeling this is the Marshall story. So contention, arbitration, demanding justice, speaking out. So this is the square between Mars and Venus, right? The Mars in Cancer, Venus in Libra, issues of fairness, Mars in the overcoming square to Venus, challenges around that, okay? It says conflicts arise when two people believe they are right and their interests become opposed. This may be because the parties have not been communicating with each other effectively or because they no longer trust each other. If the parties are strangers, then they have never had the chance to communicate or develop trust. Thus, if you wish to understand conflict, you must understand its beginnings. If you do not believe that you are in the right, you should not become involved in conflict. This is true as both a moral and a practical matter. If you do not believe in yourself and in the justness of your cause, you will not win a fight with a determined opponent. Indeed, you should never go into combat without a sincere commitment to success and without understanding your goals in advance. Conflict is a matter of values, not a matter of force. If you do not fight to vindicate values that you believe in, there is no point in going forward. Even if you have superior strength, dominating another when you know that you are wrong does not mean that you have won. It only means that you have debased yourself through the use of violence or trickery. Okay, well, that's pretty intense. And to bring a loop on that, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Don't get into a fight if you aren't committed to it. You know what I'm saying? If you have doubts about your position, there's no way you're going to win that conflict, okay? And that this could be a conflict with choosing our paths too. If you're trying to keep something afloat that you don't even really believe in, there's no way you're going to be successful in that project, okay? So here's a little turnaround for us. It says, if you find yourself in a conflict, remain calm and collected. A conflict is a potentially dangerous situation. It can easily spin out of control if you don't pay careful attention. Having entered into it, you must now find a way out of it. The most aggressive approach is not always the best one. You should first decide exactly what you want to achieve and what you will accept as a satisfactory ending to the conflict. Unless you know what your goals are, you will not be able to plan an effective strategy. By prolonging conflict without a clear plan or direction, you may destroy something that is very valuable in the process. Not only what belongs to your adversary, but what belongs to yourself. Once you have begun a conflict with another, you must have the inner strength and confidence to settle your dispute and meet your opponent halfway. Often this requires courage every bit as great as the courage to fight on. The secret of success in conflict is not the ability to prevail. It is the ability to compromise. It sounds a lot like Venus in Libra on the South Node to me, friends. So the I-Ching is reading us to filth, and now we have an animal that will hopefully give us a little bit of a boost here. And that's the cockatiel. We have the cockatiel making its triumphant return to the show here. Cockatiels are really interesting. Cockatiels are, they're like parrots basically, and they are very social. They're great communicators. Cockatiels have the ability to be great mimics. A cockatiel is teaching us to communicate and to be able to find compromises with others, to communicate who we are and what we need, and to be able to also to listen to what others need and what others are trying to teach us. This is a great avatar for us here today, to be able to have our good listening skills, to be able to reach out to people. And sometimes I think this is also a lesson to us to find balance in our creative processes too, because one of the things that we can fall victim to with a new moon in Virgo II is isolating ourselves too much to work on a project. And this teaches us, cockatiel, that we need other people. We need other people's feedback sometimes, not all the time, but I think that it can be important to get some, sociability. And if you've been working on something too long, it can drive yourself crazy. So take a break every once in a while. Have a good time with somebody. Talk about your issues. If you have a problem with somebody, talk it out. Be willing to hear someone else's perspective, and then you might be able to move forward with a positive solution, with a compromise, right? As the I-Ching told us, compromise is super important. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Yes, we've got the cockatiel here. Julene is setting their alarm for February 2025. Yeah, that's when I believe the Mars and Cancer cycle will end, and we'll finally get Mars moving out of Cancer for good. So yeah, buckle in. We're in for some challenges with Mars and Cancer. But again, we'll figure it out. Mars has been in Cancer in the past. It's retrograded in Cancer at various times in the past. We'll figure it out. All right? So that is what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Appreciate all of you. Wonderful community. Thanks for all the super chats today. Again, if you want to make a donation to the show, you can buy a super chat here or a super thanks, or you can go to Buy Me a Coffee and donate that way. Please do me a huge favor, though. Please like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Subscribe to the newsletter. That's a great way to know when new products, new classes, new live streams are coming out. I have some things that are gestating right now, and that's the greatest way to find out all of that information is to sign up for the newsletter. So go check me out, spencermichaud.com. Follow me over at Threads and Twitter and Instagram at Spencer Michaud. And we'll see you the next time, friends. Be kind to yourself. Do something productive with your time, but also accept yourself where you're at in the process. And remember, to close that gap, like Ira Glass says, just go through the process. Do a lot of work. Let yourself get messy. Let it be imperfect. And you'll figure it out eventually. And we'll figure it out together. So that's what I've got for you. Thank you, friends. Thank you for hanging out here today. Thank you for this beautiful loyal community that keeps showing up week after week. I so very much am appreciated, and appreciate all of you. Be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and I will see you all the next time.